Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the South Carolina State Library. My name is McCabe. I am the South Carolina Center for the Book Coordinator. And the Center for the Book is a Library of Congress program, and there is a Center for the Book in every state or territory. And our jobs are to promote the literary and cultural arts of our state. And as part of my job as a coordinator, I get to reach out to these wonderful authors and ask them to come and share their work with us and also add it to our collection. In last May, we had Rachel and Lisa with Kugels and Collards come, and it started a conversation about recipes and what we can learn from recipes as far as if there's war or not having a specific ingredient. And you can really see the impact of foodways and foods on our lives through the recipes, as well as history of what was going on in the society. And a lot of times also women don't necessarily show up in the history books in certain time periods, but you can see their roles more so in cookbooks. So our collections librarian, Desiree, went to a training, and one of the things we do is when people go out from the library, go to trainings, they come back and share with us what they've learned. And one of the new things that Desiree brought back was salons, which I was familiar with in talking about art history. The surrealists would get together and just discuss art issues. Wasn't very structured, have a topic, and you go from there. And that's some things libraries are doing, setting up times for salons where people can discuss these things. So I wanted to create a panel where we have people, important people in South Carolina, that very much have incorporated family recipes and the history of South Carolina foodways into their lives, their livelihood, and in their professions. So I'm very excited to have our 5 panelists here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll get started with allowing them to tell you a little bit about themselves. So first, Rachel Gordon Barnett and Lisa Kligman Harvey have an interest in all things Southern, Jewish, and historical, including foodways. Native South Carolinians, Rachel hails from small town Somerton, South Carolina, and Lisa from Columbia, South Carolina. They live in Columbia and have been instrumental in preserving Jewish history across the state. Founding members of the historic Columbia Jewish Heritage Initiative, they created the Kugels and Collards blog to preserve and share Columbia's Jewish history by collecting food stories, recipes, and photographs in a digital venue. Rachel is a past president and current executive director of the Jewish Historical Society of South Carolina. Lisa is a teacher, therapist, and artist. Her life work has been dedicated to helping children and impacting her community by creating the Columbia Holocaust Education Commission, the Jewish Cultural Arts, and serving on arts and environmental boards. Exploring Southern and Jewish foodways enable Rachel and Lisa to honor their own family histories and preserve those stories for future generations of South Carolinians. Next, we have Trip Roach. He is the 5th generation of Villa Tronco. Villa Tronco is the oldest restaurant in South Carolina with over 100 years. We're right for 84, we're almost at 100 years, round up. And they are working on their historic marker. They've had streets named in their honor, and it's just really been an integral part of South Carolina and Columbia. Little fact, I went to my first freshman formal dinner at Villa Tronco. We thought we were big time. But it's a great place. You can still go get there. Family recipes and all of the families involved. In addition to being 5th generation of Villa Tronco, he is the founder of Carolina Pong, which is a ping pong organization, as well as a page for House Speaker Merle Smith. We also have Dr. Ramon Jackson. He is the curator of African American culture and history at the South Carolina State Museum. You may have recently seen their Harvesting Heritage programs. They've been very, very successful and drawn in a lot of crowds, so if you haven't had a chance, check them out. He completed a doctoral program in history at the University of South Carolina in 2019. He served as co-historian of Columbia, South Carolina 63, Our Story Matters, a landmark public history initiative that commemorated South Carolina's civil rights movement and its dramatic impact on our nation's broader freedom struggle. Prior to joining the South Carolina State Museum in May 2023, Dr. Jackson worked as the African American Heritage Coordinator at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, where he assisted the agency with a host of public programs, exhibits, and historic preservation initiatives. He also was an assistant professor of history at Newberry College, where he taught survey courses in 20th century American history and special topics courses on Black student activism, South Carolina civil rights, and African American sport history. And then last but certainly not least, we have Chef Harold Pendleton. Harold has been in the culinary industry for 27 years and joined the Warmouth in 2015. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the Warmouth, please do. It's less than 2 miles away on Franklin Street in the up-and-coming Bull Street district in Cottontown. I live in that neighborhood, and they torture me because they smoke all of their beets, and I just smell it anytime I go outside. But it's a really great restaurant that's focusing on the way the South eats, what they grew up eating, and really the regional food, and bringing to light our local farmers through freshly grown farms, but also heritage grains like Carolina Gold rice. And so the format we're going to do here now is I'm going to allow everybody a little bit of time to talk about themselves and their relationship with recipes and that sort of stuff. From there, we invite you to ask questions. You are welcome to ask them from the audience, or if you feel more comfortable coming up here, you can do that also. But just everybody feel welcome to jump in and participate. And once we have sort of wrapped up that discussion, our preservationist, Stephanie Gilbert, will come up and give a little bit of tips on preserving family recipes. If anybody has any questions, now's a good time. Other than that, we'll get started. All right, thank you. Please.
All right, I'm just going to do a little plug, Harold, for the Warmouth. I just found out they have happy hour. And happy hour price. So I'm just saying.
This afternoon? Yeah.
Every afternoon. Every afternoon?
Tuesday, it's Margarita Tuesdays.
Oh, man. Big, I'm glad I asked you. Well, I'm Lisa Fleetman Harvey. My paternal family grew up here in Columbia, South Carolina, via Russia, Poland, New York, Estill, South Carolina, and then coming to Columbia. My grandfather had an Army-Navy store on Assembly Street, and my father was an only child, but he made up for it by having 5 children. And I'm the oldest of 5, and I realized at some point in my life, I guess after watching my mother all these years, she was a homemaker. And the Jewish or Yiddish word for a homemaker is called a balabusta. And she was just that. And after watching her take care of us and feed us, I realized somewhere along the line, I guess when I was 40, had to start feeding them. Preparing food for my own family, that I was very interested in the way she cooked and how she cooked, and then, watching and observing. So I say that food is memory. And for most of us, food is history. At least for Rachel and I, when we put this book together, Kugels and Collards, Kugel is the look at the Jewish part of the Jewish Southern table, the Jewish foods, and collards, as you well know, because y'all were here for the discussion in May, collards, and you have a lot to say about collards, and collards being the African American influence and the Southern influence on the Jewish Southern table. So for focusing on recipes, we gathered about 80 recipes for the book. And I don't want to take up too much time in my little intro, but I did want to share. Should I share this now?
It's totally up to you.
Okay. So I realized that my mother, I don't know how she did it, but she typed on a little, a typewriter. She typed up a lot of her recipes. not all of them. She had terrible spelling. He put a deer. And she even spelled kugel. This is the recipe that's featured in the book. My grandma Ida's kugel spelled all wrong. And when she made a mistake, you would have to come up and look at it. She would go back, and do the X's over the misspelled word, or over the, incorrect word or something. Yeah, no, you can pass around. It's protected. Most of us gather recipes like this, right? This actually is a menu from my recipe book, a recipe for my holiday break the fast for Yom Kippur. I haven't typed it. But I must have been a little bit like my mother, because guess what I did? I typed on the computer, on my PC. This is my friend Sandra Polikoff's brisket. And so it's saved on my computer, on my hard drive. But then I printed it out, and cut it and put it on this little card, which probably came with another cookbook. And of course, there's the dripped and brown written. Now, who would think to write it in a blue, water-soluble ink? But there it is. And then, as you know, there's collected recipes. And this is a recipe from a magazine, but it's called Black Bottom Goodies. And my friend, our friend Susan Lurie, this is Senator Isidore Lurie's wife. This is what she would bring for our celebrations at our synagogue, for weddings and for bat mitzvahs. This was her iconic recipe. And for some reason I found it and I cut out the little picture of it. And then most of us also cut out recipes wherever we find them. Here's the Toll House Pie recipe. So this is just one, a half a dozen ways we keep recipes. And, I could probably clean this up, but I won't. And I'll leave this to my children. This will be their legacy. Rachel's going to tell you more maybe about how we collected the recipes for the book. And I think she's got something that they'll love to share.
Yeah, so Lisa's far more organized than I am. I do got my mother's recipe box, and I was going through it last week. And I will say something about having your mother's recipe box, because you pull out a recipe and memories come rushing back to me. I can pull out and I can go, oh, I remember that recipe. I can almost taste it. So that's why one of the things that we found when we were collecting recipes for the book, speaking with people, so much emotion would come out. So we collected recipes. We collected stories of recipes. A lot of recipes, as you probably all know, are not written down. Many of my recipes that I have acquired in the years, I have not written down. Shame on me, because I had to go in the kitchen and actually measure everything for the things that I did put in the book. So I know some of us cook that way, right? And if you stand and watch your mother or grandmother or whoever's cooking, your father, whoever it is in the kitchen, you may learn that, but many of us are not around to even acquire that. So it's really important. That's the one thing we do say about our book, Savor Your Story. Please write those recipes down. And then I'm reminded of Mrs. Wingrove in this book, and she baked cakes for every big celebration in Columbia. It's Jewish community pat. But her son who wrote the story also said she kept a list every year. She had sort of like what Lisa's menu there, but she had all these wonderful lists with every recipe, and Esther was really yes, and what she was ordering from the grocer and what she was using for this. And so this was a very organized person with her recipes. When we talk to people and ask for family recipes, we got a lot of, well, I don't know. I just remember it tasted good. It was never written down. So we would say, well, let's give us a starting point. We acquired a recipe from somebody who swore it was mother's brisket was the best in the world. Unfortunately, we went in the kitchen and discovered the measurements were right.
And it's like 40 people.
Yeah. So we had to make a lot of adjustments. Yeah. And when you start messing with people's family recipes, let me tell you something. These are very personal, right? Yeah. So I couldn't go back to her and say, your brother's brisket's too sweet. So we just put a little pen note on it. It said, this is a very sweet brisket. Will be, cut the sugar back if you don't like your brisket so sweet. So it was a lot of fun collecting. Now, I started thinking about collecting in different ways we collect recipes. And a lot of times there's like the maven in the family who is the one who cooks all the meals. Everybody, she's known in the family as the best cook in the family. And I just went to my cookbook shelf and started pulling cookbooks out.
This was my aunt's. I just gave it to Rachel.
Yeah, this comes from a family that we're going to do a little bit more history on my search on to find out. This may end up going into a collection at College Charleston or someplace. But, this family collected all of their recipes and obviously took the time to do this with a spiral about it. This book comes from Belle Serban Field. She lived to be 104. She was from Columbia.
And basketball ovens. They had their first basketball this year.
And it's called the filtered fish and lobster sauce. Okay, so lobster is not kosher. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek title. But I will tell you, she gave me this when I first came to Columbia. She was a lovely woman. And these were all her recipes. And she wrote it with her heart and soul in it. And we do have her story as well in the book. So, this was shared with her family. And how special to be able to do that. And then I found this one today. This was an aunt of my husband's. And apparently, my mother-in-law gave me this. And here's a picture of them. Her name was Seal Barnett Mervyn. And her children gathered up all of Seal's recipes to put this loving tribute together. Now, Lisa and I are in the midst of a new book, and hopefully it'll be out in the next couple of years, and it's called Southern Simcoes, with Simcoe being a celebration. And these are stories from the South. And we've been talking to people throughout the South as we travel with the book, and we have discovered there are families that have done this as well. We met the most lovely family in Arkansas, Dumas, Arkansas. And they have a fabulous cookbook, a tribute to their mother. And they interviewed all the family members, and they got all of these anecdotes. And it's beautiful done. And it's called Pat's Plan. And we will have a story from them in Arkansas. So it's been a lot of fun. Recipes can take to a lot of places. You just don't realize the stories they can tell. So, refill.
All right. My name is Trip Roach. I'm from Villa Tronco Italian Restaurant. I'm the 5th generation. Current owners are Joe and Carmela Roach. They're my grandparents. So we've been in business since 1940, so we're going on to 85 years. Plan to celebrate that anniversary in January 13th. COVID happened, so we didn't have the 80th-year anniversary celebration, so it kind of be combined. The last big one was 75. So the founder of Villa Tronco was my great-great-grandmother, Sadie Carnaggio Tronco. And they immigrated from Sicily to Columbia. They had a few stops beforehand. I believe it was Philadelphia, Edinburgh, and they finally settled in Columbia. And that was around the Great Depression era. And then they opened Villa Tronco up in 1940. It had a few other names before then. It first opened up as Iodine Grill. And then became Tony's Spaghetti House. And then in 1949, according to Historic Columbia, it became Villa Tronco. So we've been at the same location since then, since the opening, 1213 Landing Street, so just a few blocks down the road. We opened up in a historic firehouse, 1858 when it was built. It was burned down by Sherman in the Civil War and rebuilt in 1867. So lots of history to go along even before the restaurant existed. We're letting the family recipes. We try to keep the same recipes. We've added a lot to our menu. I brought a menu today. A lot of our stuff is made in-house. From the pizza, we introduced pizza to Columbia. Nobody knew what it was back in 1940. A good story to go along with that is It's a plastic surgery place now, but the blue building across from the restaurant was the Greyhound bus station, and this was World War II era. So this is right around 1940, right in the middle of everything. That Fort Jackson was one of the biggest training bases at the time. So they would bus the soldiers down from up north, and majority of them were Italian immigrants. So they would see Villa Tronco, that's the first thing they would see. So it reminded them of their home cooking up north. So that's the first place they would go before they went to Fort Jackson. And that's how Villa Tronco kind of started, was because of that. And we've kept the same pizza recipe. We haven't changed anything. It's pre-baked crust, and they're made in the shape of a square, because back then it was just the founder, Sadie Tronco, that was doing everything in the building. So the reason it's rectangle is because you could fit more pizza in the oven rather than circular pizza. And we still do it like that to this day. We make the sauce in-house. We make all of the dessert in-house, except for the gelato. Carmela's famous chicken soup that we still serve. And then the cheesecake, which was Carmela's mother, who's also named as Carmela. It gets a little confusing with the names. But the cheesecake is really good. Still the same recipe, of course. She doesn't make them anymore because she's 100 years. She's turning 100 on the last day of the year. But yeah, so it's a lot of family recipes that we've kept, and we've added some. New chefs have come and gone and left their mark on Villa Tronco, that I'm just really proud to be a part of the family business and carry on the legacy for many years to come. I'm sorry.
Ladies' breakfast, Asia.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm kind of an odd duck here, that chef. And I'm not exactly connected to family recipes. I'm a historian. And I'm not a food historian. I've actually kind of fallen into the study of foodways through a series of exhibitions and other programs that we've been planning in and that are ongoing at the South Carolina State Museum. But before that, I also worked at the South Carolina Department of Archives History. And I thought it was really interesting, the point you made about proximity of buildings to your historic restaurant and the stories that you can capture by analyzing these spaces, right? When I was at Archives and History, I was fortunate to be a part of a project where we surveyed the state of South Carolina looking for extant buildings that house businesses that are listed in the Negro Motorist Great Book. There was a recent program here at the library where a wonderful young lady who's now the African American Heritage Coordinator over at Archives, she took my place, shared the history of the Green Book, which was a travel guide that was used by African American travelers here in South Carolina and other parts of the country that would direct them to places that would be friendly to them upon their arrival. And many of these businesses that were listed were restaurants. Here in South Carolina, if you look at the listings between 1938 and 1967, you'll find roughly 40 restaurants listed in the guide at any given moment throughout the state's history. So between that 40-year period, a number of restaurants are present. The site that you're sitting in right now is in close proximity to several of those sites, which are still standing. The Free Times new headquarters was once a restaurant that was listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book. It's called Trey's. Right across the street was a site called Magnolia's. On Gervais Street, on the 2000 block of Gervais Street, there was a site called Cozy Inn, which would have served students at Allen and Benedict College, as well as visitors to those particular campuses and residents in the Waverly neighborhood, which is a historically African-American district here in the city. And so we are fortunate here at Columbia to have several extant buildings that are closely tied to a rich history of African-American restaurateurs here in the city that needs more documentation. There's also the Blue Palace Tea Shop, which was located over on 1001 Washington Street. It's a tavern today, but another example of Black entrepreneurship here in Columbia that was kind of featured in that guide. But these are also, there are sites that were listed all over the state. And what was important about this surveying was that we weren't just documenting, right? When we were working in archives, our job is to alert local governments to the presence of historic buildings so that they could be preserved. But what we found was these were gateways to some really important local testimonies, local histories that need more attention. For example, anyone here from Chirac? Or ever been to Chirac? Okay. If you're going down 2nd Street in Chirac, you're going to see a little building called College Inn, right near what used to be the Culture Memorial Academy. The College Inn was listed in the Green Book, and it was actually operated by teachers who worked at that academy, and they would employ students as a part of that establishment. But what was even more impactful was that was also a site where local African-American activists in the 40s and 50s got together to plan and strategize for the civil rights struggle. And so they would often kind of have meetings to talk about where a march would take place, where a sit-in protest would happen in Chirac, who would be involved, and students would be privy to those discussions. So this became that kind of generational meeting ground, not just to plan the movement, but also to discuss what was to come. And so what I'm getting at here is that these spaces matter, right? It's important not just to save the recipes, but it's also important to save and preserve these spaces because they open up avenues for discussions or conversations about sometimes difficult topics that I think are still necessary and are an integral part of the work that we do at museums and the work that historians, professors, and others do at colleges, universities, and our public schools in various cities across the state. So I would just make that plea that while we're preserving recipes, let's make sure we try and preserve some of these spaces. Let's make sure we're preserving stories that are tied to these recipes so that they can be used in exhibitions and public programs like Artistic Heritage. I'll share a little bit more about that in Q&A, but I just want to kind of tie things together a little bit from my perspective.
Well, I'm in the chef at the Warmouth for, it's gone about like 3 years now. I was a sous chef before that. I got promoted up, throughout the 10 years that we're going to be celebrating here next weekend. So what we try to do is try to preserve Midlands cuisine. And that is before the TV dinners came out, everyone lost sight of the farms and, they get quick convenience food. So what we try to do is work with local farmers, and we try to get local produce and the heritage, Carolina Gold rice, and we make our own onion sausage, we smoke our own meats, we do a whole hog barbecue, which is very Midland, South Carolina cooking. But when I came to the Warmouth, that was very chef-driven. Everyone had their own recipes that from their families, and then we'd integrate them in. So the owner, Porter Barron, he has family recipes like the catfish stew and the Murray cream pie and stuff like that. It's all from his family. I have my parents own a deli, so I have a very deli culture and stuff like potato salad and all different things that they made. And now we have very good family recipes from people that worked there for a collar to so everything is being represented with the truest form of what South Carolina cooking is. Because I come from a restaurant background. My parents own restaurants. So all my brothers, they own a couple restaurants. So it's in the blood to they go on to. But we have we're the youngest of 9 kids. That we had their grandparents are from France, and they came over here in Montreal, and then we just made our way down to the south, and so we've been cooking and learning recipes ever since then.
Cool. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about your individuality. One thing I felt that tied everything together was food as memories. And that is so much of what it is to me, talking about your handwritten recipe cards. So putting together the display this month for the rare books, we asked people to staff here to share their
older recipes with us. And I cherish my grandmother's recipes partially because it's her handwriting. And I've seen things where people take the handwritten recipes and they put them on a tea towel, or you could get like "Love Me" on a necklace or that sort of stuff. But it is so much that somebody took the time and wrote it down and passed it down. And those memories, we can smell them, we can taste them, we can read them, we can see them. And then when we look at the places where this food was served, you're seeing that there's safety there. There's a culture that's inviting. When people come and say to Villa Tronco, and they would recognize the food from somewhere else. So not only is the food nourishing us and nurturing us, it's sheltering us, and it's helping us grow and continue to learn about other people. And so I love that we're able to come together and do this. And I also think part of the thing about the South, part of what I love about the South is the nature, the environment, and not living off the land, but using the land to nurture us. So I'd love to open it up for questions right now. Does anybody have any comments or questions they'd like to ask? Yes?
Are there any current Greenbrook restaurants South Carolina operate?
One, the College Inn. It's open, I believe, Wednesday through Saturday, and you can still pretty much get the same cuisine that they served during the segregation era. So hot dogs, Sundays, very much an American fare, right? Because it was intended to be a place where, travelers would stop, maybe take a brief rest, and then continue on up the state highway through towards North Carolina or down south towards Florida. So, a lot of the Greenbrook history is pre-interstate history. And so you can map out those sites by traveling the state highways, even into places as kind of remote as Aldergrove, right? And there are a couple of sites that were listed there that you can only access via the state highway. So hopefully that answers your question, but that would be the only one that's in operation. Now, I say that with a caveat. There is an extant site in Florence that was known as the Ebony Guest House. It's not in operation as a business, but the family still owns that property and still tells that story. And they were acknowledged with the historical marker a couple of years ago. And that site is really interesting because when entertainers on the Chitlin Circuit would travel through Florence, that's where they stayed. So there are some really great family stories where they're serving their family's cuisine to James Brown. It's a Lee Titan. He's coming through quite often perform at nearby Wilson Park, and he's eating the cuisine that had been shared by that family for generations, right? Or someone like Rosetta Tharpe. For anyone familiar with Sister Rosetta Tharpe, kind of godmother of rock and roll, she was best friends with the owner of the Ebony Guest House. And they had conversations and wrote letters to one another and shared recipes that were served to travelers through Florence. So again, the recipe is the key. But what doors are we opening up in terms of larger discussions of popular culture, conversations about civil rights, segregation, what life is like? There's a lot more that we can mine as we kind of look more closely at who's consuming these items.
The reason I brought that up, I ate at one in Greensboro, North Carolina, called the Magnolia House.
Okay.
List of them, Fred mentioned to again.
Yeah.
And they kept it to remain. It's crowded.
Yeah, and I mean, and they vary, right? Because you have a place like College Inn, which is geared towards certain students and young people, at jukebox, at Sundays, the root beer floats, right? But then, on that same block, there was another restaurant just up the road that was much more of a kind of fine dining establishment for what you could achieve during that period under segregation that served very different cuisine, and it much more of an adult or an elders, a place where elders would go to eat and socialize. So, the Greenbrook history opens a lot of doors and for a lot of discussions, for sure.
One thing I wanted to mention about the Iodine Grill, so South Carolina used to be the Iodine State. So I thought that was very interesting. You can see, so we moved away from calling ourselves the Iodine State, and this, y'all got a new name, and Villa Tronco is much better. But yes, what you could say through these histories and the buildings. I'm from Columbia. I grew up here. That's why I have memories with Milotronco, and I have memories at the War Mouth now. And it's part of who we are. It's our culture, and they almost become personalities in a sense. These places.
Can I speak to that for a second? So we have 60 stories in here and 80 recipes. And we do have several recipes from Holocaust survivors. Not all of our stories are from Jewish individuals, but we have African American stories as well as a variety of men and women. But the Holocaust stories remember place. The place is gone. The people are gone. But the recipe and the dishes and the visceral memories stay. And so those recipes and those, dishes, they didn't have the recipes, but they had the dish itself that was very important to remind them of that person. And, excuse me. So I think it's important to know, even if the place is gone, the recipe of the dishes are memory history. It's wonderful. Complete. Any other question? All right. So, yes, please.
I wanted to ask the two of you, what was your process for testing your recipe?
Well, we looked at them first off. If you get the recipe, and if you cook it up, you kind of know what things sort of jive. A lot of old recipes call for oleos. So we saw our bar, well, not in Jewish.
Yeah, that helped.
So we consulted with a couple of folks that were our consultants on this, and they said change it to butter, put a note in there that says we have changed these recipes to reflect today's cooking standards, right? But as far as testing, we just go in the kitchen and retest them. I mean, you get the recipe. I'd go, somebody gave me their mother's chicken gumbo recipe, and I went in and made it, and the taste was great, but it didn't have enough liquid. So the question then becomes, okay, is that how the mother made it? And that's what she remembers? Or can I adjust this so it get out of her? So it's a back and forth with people.
And the head we address a lot of the head notes. This is one of the recipes we saw grits, lox, our salmon together, and smoked salmon is lox. And I said, Rachel, this is really rich, though tends to be a little dry. So it says add liquid as needed. So we added that. But a lot of people, when you talk to them, when you interview them, or when you get their story, they go, well, it's just a little bit of this, and a handful of this, a pinch of this. And the Yiddish word for pinch, or the Yiddish word is a bissel, a little bissel of this, and so that's how your grandmother and great grandmother cooked.
So that's how I cook. So I had to really go measure. Then we found out we had a cake recipe that started with cake mix. And the recipe is so old that cake mix boxes were different size. So fortunately we had a friend who very graciously tested all of the cake recipes. I'm not a baker. She was great. And she was the one who caught that and said, we have to adjust this for today's standards. So this is something about historical recipes for sure, that you have to learn how to adapt and adjust.
We have classic recipes, southern preserves, classic Jewish recipes. But then there's some new recipes. This is kind of a classic poppy seed cake, which comes from an Eastern European German. It's called a Munn cake, which I might be poppy seed Munn cake. And it just did beautifully in this bundt pan. This is my recipe, so this is a dump cake. And so I played around with this a little bit, and I've got it right now. And it's a dump cake. It's a recipe in the book, but you don't have to have a Starry David. It works very well in a bundt pan.
Then what's that?
That's something of what?
What rate? Because in our work as a museum, we've been studying individuals in Black communities around the state
referred to as matriarchs. And so there's this beautiful portrait series we brought in when I first arrived. And one of the individuals in her biography, like in when her granddaughters describe her work, they say she didn't measure it all. It was just, they said she cooked by air. So like, how do y'all deal with that in this tested process? When someone doesn't leave a recipe behind, but people can remember like how something tasted or how it might have looked. Like, how do you account for that in the tested process?
That was not easy because, you know, people's memories, like my grandmother made the best out of cake. But maybe I'm thinking today about that building cake recipe. She didn't write it down. She just did it, right? Like the there. But is my memory of it better? And have that just grown over time? And so if I do bake it, is it never going to compare? And then what happens if I put a recipe in a cookbook and that person is totally disappointed? I mean, one of the things is we don't want to lose these recipes, but nor do we want to, you know, create something that isn't accurate. I mean, right? So, you know, you work with people, you talk about it, you know, they give you as much information as possible. Some of it we left in the original, like it was written out, and we did that just totally because that was the way it was given to us. But yeah, not the other Casey Meany,
Who is a retired judge. He gave us a 10,000-word transcript for his story. Connected to lots of Jewish families and his children of Jewish, interfaith and biracial family. But we loved his family's Southern recipes, but we left one of them in his story, I believe, in a paragraph form because that's just how we knew it and told it, and we didn't want to mess with it. Now we do have a couple of others that we said no, please go back and try to get back and get the measurements from their sister. But for history's sake, we did leave it in that paragraph post, kind of the whole rest told.
We have Annie Gallagher's okra gumbo. It was a told recipe. It has stale. Yeah. So I'm sure, you know, let's engage the audience. Do you all tell us about your recipes? Are they written down in your family? Do you have these? There's the family.
My question about that, or kind of open that up too. So many people, you know, now in the digital age, like if I need to look up something, I'm gonna Google, how do I cook this? I've never seen this before. So especially if you're not local to your family, you can't just talk to your mom or your grandmother, be like, hey, what do I do with a ham roast versus a ham spice? Like the difference. So as people are moving more into this digital age, what is the best way for young people to keep these family connections and these family recipes where people are just Googling things now versus going into your recipe book? Because I have my grandmother's recipes, my mom's recipes, but I know the younger people who will just Google it if they want to cook it. You know, like how do we address that growing digital?
I mean, I'm also thinking we take all our pictures with our phones now, and everything's going in a cloud. You know, they have photo albums like I have that kind of my mother very, you know, put all the names and everything. But how do you do that? Well, for one thing, you've got blogs. And all how to start. Right. All of this has been digitized. And it just depends on, I guess, the individual to what degree they want to preserve, save. You know, how are y'all going to do it? Yeah.
In this family, how are you doing? How are you staging your recipes? How are you going to tell you where it's turning on how to make it a safer recipe?
They have recipe books, but I think they do need to be digitized.
There you go.
I think
You bring things like the company. You're a library employee, aren't you, Karen? Yes. Yeah. I agree. It's a great. Let's talk on the bit about they're told. Oral histories are so important because that is so much of how we pass things down, and there are several different projects throughout the state and throughout the country where people are collecting oral histories, but that is part of it. And even though if you look it up online and it says, do such and such, but your grandmother's the one that knows that you have to beat it on the counter 3 times, or you've got to get the air bubble and that sort of stuff. So where are we? It's going to become
blogs are the new cookbooks, or YouTube videos are the new cookbooks or discussion. So I guess we have to address like preserving the old, but also embracing the future. And one doesn't negate the other, just different mediums.
I think it's memory muscle too.
Yeah.
Is if you make that same recipe, like Lisa says, she makes that cake over and over. Intentional. Or like, Christmas is next week, right? I mean, all right, well, my family, they were merchants in these little towns, and where we don't celebrate Christmas. Hanukkah, the first candle, was also Christmas. All of our family would gather in Somerton, and then my mother at a certain point said, I'm done, and she passed it to me. And we do the same menu every year. Everybody's nodding, right? Everybody knows what they're assigned. Everybody knows what they're doing. It's a memory muscle. So I know exactly what I have to do. And that's how we kind of keep those traditions going forward. I can go and Google a recipe any night of the week and do something different, but does it mean I'm going to come back to it? Is it going to become part of my family's, repertoire? Maybe not. But the ones that I do love, I have, and maybe not as organized as Lisa and on recipe thoughts. But I do have those. I know where they are. And my children know them. At least they know enough to call me up and say, hey, I want your squash casserole recipe.
And Allie, like a recipe that you get offline today, you tried it, and you like, hey, 3 out of the 4 people in my family said, we need this and that. So then that recipe becomes yours because you're changing it and you're altering it. And then your sons will be like, remember when mom made that and we had to switch that? So they'll start new, and then they'll do a vlog on it.
Well, and every generation does a rip on that because, like, we finally, it just occurred to me, Lisa's grandmother's pickle. It probably started off as parb because it had no dairy in it because she kept kosher. But then her mother got hold of it and she added a little bit more dairy to it and started jazzing it up. And then the 70s, 80s come around and everybody's putting cornflake topping on it with airwaves. And so in Flyers, they all got silver flakes. So this is an evolution of a recipe through a family. And now Lisa's gotten it and she adds butter. And apricot jam.
And apricot jam and pineapple, so make it a little sweeter, but it's later, so better good.
One of the librarians talk about copyright issues with recipes and the fact that recipes can't be copyrighted, if I'm correct.
Well, I mean, it's
And
One ingredient.
yeah, and how that has allowed what you're saying of evolution of recipes, because they are basically in the public domain. And it's not like Popeyes, I mean, it covers the name next year. And things like that, which is not big. Yeah.
so.
I still think I used to say, well, I can't break copyright law, I can't teach. But, how does copyright law with recipes, which is unique to recipes, sort of promote what's being stolen here?
So, as a librarian, if someone came in and said, we want to make a copy of this book, the whole book, we would not be able to allow that because of copyright. That's somebody's intellectual property. We do contribute to coloring books where we take things that are in the public domain now. So you can take those. But as far as copyright, and I can't speak specifically on the copyright for recipes, but you do have to respect somebody's intellectual property. You can hand cut. There are ways around. If you need, yes, Lisa, this I'm not going to answer that question. Okay, I give a question when you get things. Okay. I still like the copyrights. Okay, like you just have a list of ingredients, you cannot copyright that. Okay, that's what, but it's the photography. It's the description of the recipe, the story. When I see that's all intellectual property because that's unique to a person.
Right.
You can't say, I have these vegetables and this meat and this, and be like, well, it's mine, no one else can do it. Because it gets more into like ideas and certain things like that. So it does get a lot murkier in the U.S. copyright system, but you can make it so like your cookbook could not be completely
stolen opportunities. You have your photography, you have your stories, you have your process. We wanted to be very careful because we know that people change recipes and take the name of it. But we have stories and honoring African American women who were employed by Jewish families, and it was their recipes, and we named it so. We did not want to appropriate that away from the person who gave it to us. Now, my mother's brownies, well, they could be her mother's, but I mean, her mother-in-law's brownies. But we did try very hard to appropriate the right name, so not to go. Sorry, Kim. And you know, in these cookbooks, whoever gives you the story becomes their recipe. You know, McCabe, you know, who was mother, you know, McCabe.
I was going to put a brownie recipe in, and we called this, my children called Mimi's Brownies, and Lisa took one look at it and said, that's not Faye's brownies, that's my mother's brownies. So, you know, people share recipes around if you're trying hard to group, right?
No, I'm not probably not sugar. Okay. Yeah, I've been terrible sweet too. And I was reading a book and it kept mentioning an olive oil. It was in the 1940s, early 1940s. It was an olive oil lemon cake, which right. So I looked up some cake out of London and I thought like that. And I made it. I looked it up for the next reason. It obviously it's not sweet at all, right? And so then it made me really start thinking about our use of sugar, because I put sugar in my cornbread. Like I'm an hour, so I put sugar in my double eggs. Like how for the right time. You're great. It's like sugar. If the warm out stuff is like light, it's just great coffee. But the olive oil lemon, it was fantastic in my opinion. But it wasn't sweet really at all. It was a very, very little sugar. And it made me really start thinking about though, when did in the United States we really start to add sugar? When did that become something, in what time period? I'm just curious if you all have any perspective on that, because obviously sugar was a expensive commodity at different times in our history, and then now we all probably have sugar hungry. Now I feel backs, not so.
Anybody have any historian? Yeah, thinking.
It does. I mean, when I'm what you're doing.
If you're thinking about kind of the history of sugar, I mean, it does bring up these conversations of the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
And sugar was one of the commodities that drove that, right? And, you know, when it first arrives upon our shores, it's a luxury item. As a matter of fact, British High Society goes nuts over it in the 18th century. Like, it's one of those things that you had to have wealth to acquire. Fast forward to the baby boom, where you start to see cereals and you start to kind of see an emphasis on cheap nutrition. Sugar becomes a way for Americans to satiate that need, right? As you have population growth, inclusion of sugar in various types of cheap foods becomes the way that we give ourselves those cheap nutrients. So, like, if you're a quick and dirty history, it's a much more modern trend, the amount of sugar that we consume. But you're right. You know, one of the things that I found fascinating in some of the discussions that we've had with individuals who we refer to as matriarchs in the work that we're doing, once we're still with us, is how little sugar they use in their recipes. You know, and how little we even talk about desserts. Like many of the women that we've documented, Martha Lugass and Emily Meggett, for those who are familiar with the matriarchs, Edna Charlotte Jenkins, especially, you know, they don't really talk about dessert that much. There are kind of a few choice kind of items that have come up, like the Charleston Chewies, which are kind of very much brown sugar, sometimes molasses, but not much beyond that. But for the most part, it's savory foods that we've been talking about. So dessert hasn't really come up very often in our work, and I'm sure it pops up in y'all's work, but it hasn't been a topic of conversation for us. As a matter of fact, Chef Jenkins, who owns Gullah Cuisine in Mount Pleasant, she's made a move to get away from not just sugar, but also to make traditional Gullah cuisine healthier, right? And so shifting to turkey from pork, or even creating vegan options for those who are interested in consuming Gullah cuisine, but leaving some of the kind of savory meats out of it. So you're right. It is something that, I think modern recipes are kind of a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. And those are some reasons why.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, culturally, for the different people too, they sugar, what the sugar, if there's any. Anne Byrne, who just wrote the history of Southern here, of baking in the American South. Baking in the American South. Sorry. She does a whole chapter on that. Just some of the actually from Did you look at that? Because how much things like that is all about baking. And she was just here, and she is a new friend of ours and did a testimony for this book, and she's fabulous. She really does her heart.
Now, one of the things you might look at are the byproducts of the sugar making, the refined sugar or making process. The historical books that came out through the University of Carolina Press about 2 years ago, kind of South Carolina foods and everything else, where they included things like sorghum. And I think which first things my thing is staying away from refined white sugar and let's use some of the byproducts like with hot things in this style and hot things so this begins from cane sugar. And that particular book there's a I think it's a 1916 article on again sorghum Edgefield from the Edgefield newspapers and everything. So I've been looking at moving more towards, sort of the discarded part of the process is take away from the refined white sugar. So using for me and, sort of less processed.
We have a hot milk cake, which is an African American kind of ancestral recipe. I know it didn't use sugar. Casey's mother and gave him that recipe, and it's not very sweet to begin with. In fact, it tastes more actually like a cornbread.
The New York Times just came out with they call it Zero Kirsten molasses library, where molasses is sort of at the center of it, and it's not a very sweet. I know 1 liter one. Sugar, no sugar.
That's right.
Flour and flour and everything, but
Chef, how do you do yours?
We do. Right now, we do we got these pans that look like honeycombs.
I see.
So we just use honey in our cornbread.
You could get a cornbread board.
Yeah.
like first.
Yeah. And it looks like a honeycomb when it comes out pan.
Like that?
Water, then the honey's top.
I ordered with the course. Yeah. So
I just want to take a moment and thank Joe. They make him work a lot. But thank you so much for participating. We'll still continue the conversation, but just want to thank you so much for your participation today.
Dude.
So, you want to say something real quick about your music program?
Yeah.
Okay, it's really cool. Music program too?
Yeah. So we offer Broadway opera nights first 2 Thursdays of the month. And then that's sung by the Palmetto Opera led by Peter Barton. And then Broadway is the last 2 34th Thursdays of the month led by Kyle and Linda Collins. So we do offer a lot of music, but you have to book reservations in advance because they fill out about a month ahead of time.
So I don't do is to January. Yeah, that's wonderful. Let's go. We will play. Don't get. Let's go. Yeah, hard.
Hey, Kaseka, we were. I want to hear a little bit more about Midland students, but then I also wanted to touch on like the minorities, like listening to the Jewish community and African American community that sometimes that like went through Rosenwald schools and that sort of stuff, as well as working together and also sharing those sex and needs and communities. Harold, do you want to start here?
about the
Midlands cuisine.
yeah, Midlands cuisine. The Midlands cuisine, from what I've been studying, is that it's mostly was starting. I know, like with the yellow mustard quality sauces and the sausages and stuff like that is from German immigrants that settled here in that time period. And you know, we do a lot. We do kind of do odes to Dutch for cooking and using Dutch for pumpkins, and you know, we have a cookbook Dutch for cookery that we cook out of, and so my mustard barbecue sauce is a traditional Dutch forward recipe that we get that from. But with Midlands cuisine, we're just really like any type of heirloom vegetable or field peas and stuff like that. We have farmers in West Columbia that are growing field peas, and we have Anson Mills here. That's where we get a lot of our like Carolina gold rice. If I don't, if I'm, I get like, you know, from different types of grits. We have like Anson Mills grits, and then we have an artisanal grit maker here in town, Congaree Milling grits, and that's where I'm mostly get my grits from, the Congaree Milling grits guy. But I also milled grits with him, so it was like, you know, I was trying to learn all where this, you know, where all food comes from, especially the Midlands cuisine stuff. And just took a deep dive into that.
I've known kids for about 20-something years. I just like, he owns Congaree Milling, so I just can imagine y'all milling grits, and I don't figure out
A lot of work.
Well, part of the exhibit, the food we celebrated, does sort of break up into different regions, so I wanted to highlight the Midlands. Wesley, you had a question?
Yeah, I was curious. How did you come up with the name Warmouth?
The warmouth is the fish. Yeah, and that's like just a favorite fish that they would like to catch. And the owner Porter Barron and his best friend Brett, they love the fish, so that was one of the coolest fish names, and they wanted to name it that. So it was part of the I think it's a largemouth bass, so they started breeding it. So we always do it. We always have like North Carolina trout, or we have South Carolina fish. We try to keep everything local, like as far as the fishing and the fishery stuff.
I see lots of chum up things from Bradford Farms, like that Osprey.
You got Bradford collards. That's our mainstay for collards of that. But right now he's doing like coming to the sweet potatoes. They discovered an onion that's like the sweet onion, but instead of Vidalia onions, they call them Santee onions, because that's where the farming's come through. We're growing, so we can't help it out. But yeah, and then so there's like just a lot of different work with him. He's started to cultivate and make like African groundnuts, bringing that back in to selling to chefs. He's very like into selling just to chefs, and then creating niches with them.
I see, and I don't know, you know, I have my confirmation bias blinders on, but I see people interested in food, and maybe it's just my friends are foodies, but you want to know where it's coming from, and Freshly Going Farms. I've known Paul for forever. And I like seeing people my age, younger, investing back into the community, bringing this food, and it is so much more than a meal. So you may pay a little more than you're going to pay at an Applebee's, but you're getting so much more. You know, like you're investing back into your community, into your farmers, your everybody. And I love to see that, where it's just become sort of the whole piece. Now we're talking about it, and we're bringing in other people, and I just really like to see that. Thank you for sharing that. And then I mentioned something about Rosenwald schools, which I see, you know, where it brought together African American and Jewish communities, and there have been a lot of marginalized populations in the South, and we do see people coming together, and a lot of times it is flank foods. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. I haven't seen as connection between food and Rosenwald schools as that might. It's actually a topic that needs more exploration. But what I can say is one of the conversations we're having right now with our Artistic Heritage programming is what exactly Midlands cuisine looks like, right? Because it seems to be very transient, right? Like this is
very much a city where people kind of pass through and you stay, but you're bringing, kind of traditions from the low country, traditions from the upstate, even from the kind of far corner of the state. And so, there's a lot of kind of mixture of cuisines and cultures here that you may not necessarily see at a place like, say, Oconee and Pickens County, right? And so I think that's one of the struggles that we're having as we plan the next series of events in the spring is to kind of figure out, like, when we do our Midlands Marketing Heritage, what does that look like? Whose cuisine is privileged? How do we make sure that all of the folks who have contributed so much to what we eat here in Columbia are represented? Because, sure, it's about Black culinary traditions, but there is this conversation we had about exchange and appropriation and kind of how people are trading recipes and sharing these dishes with one another, what that looks like. So, admittedly, it is kind of a struggle right now for us because the Midlands deserves as much attention as the Low Country and the Upstate, and we're trying to figure out what that looks like.
It is hard to appropriate food, but it's low country, and sort of near Clemson what you're gonna get, and that sort of stuff. But we're like, what is it? And maybe it's because we're in the capital city, and so many people do travel around. We bring things in, but it's nice to have that as a focus. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Harvesting Heritage?
Sure. So Harvesting Heritage is a program that we developed starting last May. It's a series of public programs that the museum has hosted to have discussions about contributions of African Americans to South Carolina culinary traditions around the state. And so we've had 4 programs thus far. All of them have been focused on Black contributions in different sections of South Carolina. So we've done 2 discussions on the Low Country, 1 on the Upstate, and then 1 on a little section of Oconee and Pickens County that we described as Black Appalachian. And so we've got a really nice reception from museum visitors who've come quite often, and then we've also had a lot of first-time visitors to the museum for these events. These programs are curated by myself, and then also a rising Low Country star, Chef Amethyst Ganaway. She's a food writer, chef, culinary historian. She helped curate these discussions to take a closer look at these places all over South Carolina. Just give you a flavor of what you can expect if you join us. During our September event, we had a wonderful panel featuring descendants of folks who established Brown's Oyster Company down in James Island. We also had Tia Clark, who was the proprietor of one of the most popular Airbnb kind of excursions. She does crabbing off of the docks down in Charleston. And then we had a couple of other Low Country chefs join us, and we did a crab crack right there at the museum. That's fun. First time we've ever done anything like that. Had tents set up at the museum. Folks were coming in and out. Had live music. Folks really enjoyed that. And we paired that with a really powerful discussion of food, sustainability, the waterways, and kind of the historical and contemporary importance of seafood in that area of South Carolina. We just had one of our programs in November where we discussed the Appalachian section of South Carolina, so Oconee and Pickens County, specifically Liberia, which is a Black freedom town established shortly after the Civil War that is still kind of peopled and kind of operated by descendants of those original freedmen families. And so they talked about the importance of food as a kind of glue for that community, of means of keeping the community together, bringing young people back despite migration. And then they were able to kind of tie those discussions to some larger contemporary issues like land ownership, clan violence, and different things like that. So food has been kind of a gateway to these larger discussions of social topics in different parts of the state. So give you a preview of what we got coming up. In the spring, in February, we're going to be at Penn Center, so we're taking the show on the road. We're going to do a conversation called Low Country Legacy, featuring Chef B.J. Dennis, Victoria Smalls, Tindaja Brown, and one of the matriarchs who's still living, Sarah Green, whose family owns Gullah Grove Restaurant down on the Ice. So it'll be a really powerful discussion about the legacy of African Americans in that area, and we'll have a kind of banquet. It'd be more of an upscale banquet at that particular event. So tickets are on sale now. And then in March at the museum, we're going to have a free day. So with the price of your admission, Harvesting Heritage will be kind of at the museum. We'll have folks from the PD region come and share their foodways legacies. And then in May, we're going to do a conversation about the Midlands to close out this series of events. And like I said, we're open to ideas, looking for what does that look like? And so if you've got suggestions, I'll leave my information, and I'm open to ideas about how we can really promote the Midlands as a place where food has come alive and remains an important part of our lives.
I've seen food as a gateway for conversations, especially since like the pandemic. Michael Twitty, which I'm sure y'all are familiar with, he's Jewish African American. He does historic food preparation, and we also have one of his books about rice. But he was Rich on My Rig had them talking, and he's doing videos. And then Netflix had Hide on the Hog talking about barbecue, so the different things like that. And also, it should be important to include in this discussion how much we as a white society have taken from minorities and like soul food. Okay, they were given the worst parts of certain things and made something better out of it. So it's important to know about that and learn from that, and also make sure that we are honoring the history as well as the future. And I love that these conversations are happening by something as innocuous as food, that we can really talk about it.
Well, it's, Jessica Harris, who was a food historian, and she created High Up the Hollywood without her kind of her flag. But she always says that through food, we find out that there is more that connects us than separates.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Just one question, just on personality of ingredients. So a lot of times you go in the grocery store and you don't want to take things or else you feel like I did or I thought. So what do you sell things with? And do you sell things with again restaurant things?
That's so you shall.
And that you cook seasonally? Yeah, you cook seasonally. You're part of the SC certified, and they have like a list every month of like what's produce of that season, what's not. But I'll base a lot of my cooking, like the recipes or any specials I'm doing off of that. In the winter months, like we change and whatever local farms are still growing, we'll still try to get produce from them. But there's right now, I'm still getting tomatoes because South Carolina is famously hot. It's almost it's not get clogged enough to get a lot of tomatoes. So, but I get them from them. So it's like I'm not getting tomatoes when I'm overstate, like most rest to me. And so, but yeah, I just try to keep everything in season. Like okra season is done, so I'll have okra on. I try to. Some people will get okra from another country, or you can get heirloom tomatoes from Canada right now, and they're really good, but they're just Canadian. We want to keep it as a food way for us, for the local farmers, cannot do that.
So one cool thing about the state library is that our job is to collect every outward-facing publication that a state agency puts out. So we have lots of cool things for Certified South Carolina that show you what's in season. We also collect these cookbooks and many things like that. So you can come here and do a little bit of research and see what's in season. And I think going back to cooking without processed foods, also cooking with what's in season. This is when we have this. This is when we have that, and why. It brings us back to a more organic.
But when I was a kid growing up, that's how we always cooked.
Yeah.
Work in a small farming community, so it's whatever was coming in the farm is what was on the table. So, right?
Yeah, you couldn't get eat strawberries really till when was it?
Yeah, it's like in the
over like mid-spring.
Yeah, so not all year long.
Yeah, but nowadays we don't get whatever you want whenever we have it. But I try to cook seasonally. I kind of like it better that way.
As soon as they locally more.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be better for the environment. It's gonna be
Like, I feel.
but right now we're gonna bring Stephanie up. She is Stephanie Gilbert is our preservation and digital curation librarian. She has been working in preservation for 8 years and has been at the State Library for 3.5 years. She has been very helpful with my own schooling, helping me. We actually preserved a cookbook that I got from my grandmother. It says Trust in Receipts, and it's like from 1950s, and pages were out. And she really helped me with that, and it is truly a treasure, as well as she put together the display that we have there. So please do take a moment to check that out. And I'm going to turn it over. We're still just, you can anywhere right here. Hello, good afternoon. McCabe threw me a bit of a curveball when she asked me about this. She said, you talked about preserving family recipe cards, which I found quite amusing because when I give my preservation talk, I'm really stressing about things like I tell staff to keep their water bottle with a closed lid away from any archival documents or books. You want to handle these items clean, dry hands. And when you're cooking in the kitchen, we have none of that. Flour all over your hands, stuff is everywhere. So I thought, gosh, what can I say about preserving family recipe cards? So I thought about it for a while, and it's a bit of a challenge in a sense, because a kitchen has all of the things that you want to technically avoid preservation. Like it has heat, it has humidity, light, water, and food, which are all things that you don't typically want around you because they're archival of anything. So when you're working in a kitchen, that kind of feels like an impossible task. So I tried to think of a few creative solutions and then a few a bit more practical solutions. So what can we do in this space to sort of mitigate damage? So one of the big issues is light. Can light cause the fading of inks and colors? So, you have it out when you're working with it, but after that, you want to try to, put it away in a cabinet, put it in a box like this. This is perfect. It causes builds an extra layer of protection from the elements. So you put it in a cabinet, that's an extra layer. It's kind of an envelope and an envelope. So something like that is really great. You never want to store your items out on the counter when you're not working with it, if you can help it. Another thing you want to do is try to keep things out of humid areas. So changes in humidity can cause the fibers in paper to actually expand and contract, which causes wear over time. It can also cause the edges of paper to curl up or wrinkle. So you want to store your recipe cards and books away from the sink or the stove. So like I have mine in a higher up cabinet in the corner of my kitchen. So like if you have a cabinet right above your stove, all of that humidity that's rising up, you probably wouldn't want to keep them right there or right above your sink, especially not below your sink, if you were to have a pipe burst or something like that. My best advice would be to consider storing these items in an office space. So I have several recipe books, which I just keep with my regular books on a bookshelf in my hallway or in an office or something like that. And then when possible, you want to store them in upper cabinets rather than lower ones. Humidity actually goes down with gravity or sunlight. So that's one thing to consider. Again, it's funny, but when possible, try to do your recipes away from simple ingredients, but that's not really So one thing that I do is I take a lot of pictures of my recipes. I'll view them on my phone or my iPad. That's a way to share things with my parents. So where's this recipe? Open your iPad. We have a shared album that, we try to look at. So that can be very helpful. But then if you have an old family recipe that you want to take care of, this has been mentioned many times, but digitization can look many different ways. This is one of the best ways to preserve something. So you can just take a photo of it with your phone. A lot of phones have scan apps that can be really great. You can scan something on a regular printer scanner, something like that, which is a great way to preserve it, because not only are you preserving the recipe with the ingredients, but you're also preserving what makes special. You're capturing
all of those old stains that have built up over time. So I know Wix did the display case, and I put out a call for all the migrants to bring us your old recipe cards. To go like, how old? And like, I want it to look old, right? Like, I didn't want the pristine, newly written recipe of yesterday. I wanted the one that had been used and loved, and that's what we have in our display case over there. So one of the ones that I love, I think, is a family recipe from my grandmother. It's so old, it's so crinkled, I didn't even know I had it. So I'll be standing back and using that instead of that actual recipe card. But that's what makes it special, is how it's been used over time. So digitizing it is really great. And then most importantly, don't hesitate ever from using these things because you have to preserve it or something like that. I've worked in archives for a long time. You could last. It doesn't have to be the most archival, right? Because you see these things, they've been touched and touched and touched. So one of the common misconceptions in the library world is that when you're handling old things, you use cotton cloths. That's terrible, terrible practice. You want to use your hands. People have been using their hands on paper for the millennium, and guess what? It's still around, it's still in museums, it's still in libraries. So use it and love it, and it'll survive. Stains show history, and it's a really fun, cool thing. So the best thing really that you can do is digitize it. You like really, really fancy. You can put recipe cards in something called Mylar, which can be found on basic archival websites, maybe even Amazon. I won't look there, but I'm sure Amazon has everything else. So it's an archivally based device with plastic sleeve that lets it breathe, but still encapsulates it. Or if you have your little recipe card separators of things like that. If you look for acid or lignin free, those age differently over time and they'll last longer. But yeah, those are my best tips for presenting stuff. That was so helpful. Is there an app, like a cookbook app for your phone?
I bet there is. I think
These
so.
are fun. I mean, think about, or, I guess all those little cookbook, all those Shutterfly or the things you could do on your phone, you could do that. And there's so many different ways to say things. So you can, like, this is an archive. You built one with your book. We say this is an intentional archive. Yes.
Well, we use like Google Drive and my family to organize all of like our fun out of recipes, or like I was saying right now, like if we get something from a cooking blog that you really liked, we'll pull it out to like our master.
I have those shared and have them with my parents, like I mentioned. Or even like if you bring it back to like Facebook and Instagram, you might not know this, maybe you do. You can save things in there and make collections. So in each of those, I have like a folder that every time I see a recipe that I want to save online, save it to that specific folder, and you can share that like with family and friends also. So there are also different ways to preserve stuff like that. There is one app that I have. I have a book. I don't remember what it's called, but you can like import recipes into it. And then I also have it. It's can you print out a Pinterest? It's called Pinterest. Yeah, I find off of Pinterest. Yeah, you might have to like convert the file. How do you?
Same thing. You can go to the original Pinterest stage, the original place where you found a piece of metal.
Yeah. Okay. Now think about it. If there's not a good, you can
Put me out something that's facing it.
Yeah. I did. Somebody do it. I did a little bit with Cooklist. I like it. And for recipes were helpful. Okay, there's an outlook list. Cooking out, but that's not going to make a cookbook like a top.
We do have a book over there on our monthly display on the other side of the display case about preserving recipes. And every resident of South Carolina 18 or older is eligible for a free library card. So please take advantage of that. You can check this book out. We have tons of cookbooks here. And also, if you happen to have a cookbook that involves South Carolina and are willing to let us look at it, we could possibly add that to our collection. Stephanie is available to answer questions. She does have some business cards here if you want to email her. I feel like we could talk about so much more. And Lisa and Rachel have Peebles and Collars copies to sell. Then we also have a copy that's available for checkout in our collection, and we have one copy that stays here forever in our collection. We always keep one copy that never circulates because our job is to preserve our South Carolina history, and that's a part of it now. I didn't really get to touch on too much of like how you can see what's going on in history through the recipes. There's so much more that we could talk about. Is there anybody that has a question that they would like to ask now? Yeah? Okay. Do y'all have any final comments?
I think I'll make mine with Jessica Harris's update brings us together.
Definitely.
If you're interested in learning more about Hearts and Heritage, visit the State Museum website, scmuseum.org. And the prompt is right on the front page. So we'd love to have you.
And y'all digitized a good bit of your collection.
Oh, yes. We're on the fourth IMLS grant. So we are roughly 60% through digitizing and photographing our cultural history collection. But the vast majority of this work is our natural history collection. We have 1.1 million objects, and 1 billion of those are about the natural history.
Wow.
So looking forward to finishing it up sometime like next year.
What a Pedro.
Yeah, it's been good fun.
Carol was letting us know all of the drink specials, but they are also taking orders for Christmas or any holidays.
Yes,
Correct.
Cooking Christmas, you had old briskets, or hand chopped, half sliced brisket, and we do spiral cut hams.
We have red, but
We smoked on, we do a traditional pit, about 3 block pit, so we're smoking out there. We also, we do also like corned beef or Reubens and stuff out there too, so we're just gonna do, we do a big like brisket to so we're gonna have that available for Christmas, plus sides, and we do the bourbon cream pie, like the front.
Yeah. And then I think during football season, y'all do a tailgate.
Yep, tailgate's back.
And Thanksgiving time, they were doing turkeys. I read menus online. Oh, it's so true. And they have this, and then Mondays are prime rib night. I live in walking distance.
Kind of like game meats, like quail, venison, and all different, just, lamb.
that's the people with why not?
Oh, I got a bunch. Yeah, no.
A little bit for each of this.
We're doing quail and waffles right now.
Whale lights.
So it's play out chicken and waffles. We're doing fried quail and medallion perhaps.
Cool.
And honey butter.
Okay, something.
We usually do a quail perloop.
I'm trying to back.
They have a really great chicken thigh, and y'all make your own onion sausage as well. Carolina Gold Rice.
Yeah, these Choice Farms chicken is
Not that.
or it's a local North Carolina, South Carolina farms that like they get all their chickens from. So there's also a chicken place in War, South Carolina called Best Dressed Chicken.
Well, again, thank y'all everyone, the panel, and thank you to the audience. Thank you so much for your participation. It's sort of a little different thing I was trying out, and I feel like it was very successful. But I love that we can come together and discuss these things and learn from our history and help forge forward into the future. So thank you all.
Thank you.